here are scenarios for both, if in fact it works out, that BYU, despite the loss this past weekend, and Colorado, they're on a nice little run. Here are scenarios where both of those teams can clinch this weekend. Clinching scenarios. That doesn't mean that this doesn't mean that Arizona State and Iowa State can't get in, or others. BYU can earn a spot in the championship game if they beat Arizona State, and I'm not so sure that's going to happen in Tempe, and if Utah beats Iowa State, and that surely doesn't look like it's much of a possibility either. Colorado can secure a berth in the championship game if they get a win against Kansas and then wins by both BYU and Utah. That's both teams, BYU and Colorado, that can clinch this weekend, but a lot of if, ands, and buts, candy and nuts and whatever else, along with both teams having to win this weekend. What a weekend it was. I mean, literally just phenomenal. Not good news for BYU, but they're still alive. Arizona State on just a tremendous run in what they've done, and Iowa State bounces back, and others. Baylor's on a heater. Just a fun weekend, and that doesn't even include the rest of what happened in the top 25.
I'll make it easy for BYU and Colorado. Just win the games. Like, just win. Like, don't worry. You can't worry about anything else. But, yes, if Colorado wins and gets some help, they're in. BYU just need to keep winning or start winning again. I mean, after that loss, which was a game where I didn't think it was going to be all defense because I didn't really think Kansas's defense was that good, but pretty much all defense and special teams. Not a lot of offensive fireworks in that Kansas-BYU game late on Saturday night. But, BYU kind of – eventually you play close game. Somebody's going to get you.
Yeah, they had the ball. They had the ball at the end of the game. They ran out of downs and distance, and got to give no question what a great win for Kansas in that win against BYU on the road.
Yeah, I mean, that was a nice little shakeup at the top. If you're somebody who's into chaos, this is definitely the league for you because everybody's beating up on each other. There's no more unbeatens remaining, and there's a lot of questions still with a couple of weeks to go. Congratulations to Kansas. I mean, you want to talk about hot teams. Baylor's pretty hot right now. Colorado's pretty hot right now. Kansas is hot right now. Arizona State is hot right now. But the Jayhawks, we talked about this, mentioned it 3 or 4 times last week whenever this game got brought up, whenever Kansas or BYU got brought up of, hey, I'm not saying BYU is going to lose, but they need to be careful this weekend, even if it's at home. And sure enough, their luck ran out. And they're a very good team. They still have everything in front of them, but no longer a mulligan. And you could kind of see this coming. I know I had the little back and forth with the BYU fan, and it was really over me having games backwards. I had mentioned UCF as a game that they had struggled with when I was thinking of Oklahoma State, and it was a different game I was thinking of for BYU, but the point stood that BYU had 2 or 3 games up to that point where they were very fortunate to have gotten the win. And that's just, look at the score. That's just true. And then they dabble with it a couple more times here of late, including last weekend with Utah, and it's just a matter of, dang, I mean, are they just going to be this team of destiny and skate by all of their close games, which is, typically how destiny-type years happens, or is that eventually going to catch up to them? And it caught up to them on Saturday night. Kudos to Kansas. Tough loss for BYU, and I know there's a lot of frustration coming out of that one with OC, Aaron Roderick, and the play calls at the end, and really the play calls throughout his tenure in this year, but really boiling over on Saturday night with how that all ended with the ball in their hands. So, that was an excellent game and definitely brought a lot more chaos to this league that's got a lot to sort through with a couple weeks to go.
Jayhawk Champ in the chat room. Kansas just won back-to-back games against number 17 and number 6. You're exactly right.
I've been saying all year long that they are the most unlucky team when it comes to the end of games, and been saying that for like 4 or 5 weeks now. If you look at their first part of the schedule, they were piling losses up, but they weren't blowout losses. They were close games, and they could just not find a way to win. They were finding ways to lose, and that was the case with them. And much like Baylor, when they're playing Colorado and an actually good Utah team and Iowa State, and you're going like, damn, all these losses, like, well, look who they're playing. The schedule eases up in the second half. With Kansas, it was like, damn, look how they're losing. If they can ever learn how to win, then they could be the team that everybody thought they were going to be. And here we are. They've learned how to win. Jalen Daniels is playing better. And they are, cruising right now, and it's been a really nice turnaround for Lance Leipold and company.
And Kansas has a chance to really mess things up because they're hosting Colorado coming up. We'll have the schedule and so much more. So what a weekend it was.
Yep. Can I just make one more note on Kansas? So Lance Leipold, a couple weeks ago, after he had his first good game of the year, Jalen Daniels, doing a radio interview, said, "Look, we kept him in a box, kind of in mothballs in spring, and new offensive coordinator comes in. He got no work. He had no work with the first team until really the second full week of practice when they, knew he got through the first without being hurt. So really, he looked, Craig said it after the first week. He's like, he looks super rusty. And you start thinking, well, he's been practicing. How can he look rusty? But that was part of it, is that new offensive coordinator, new things, and now they appear to have adjusted to it. Now, this week is not one that I think they'll put up on the board of like, good job, offense. I mean, one of their touchdowns was because of a muffed punt, a quick kick. So,
that was a brilliant call, though. That actually absolutely turned the game on its head because BYU didn't know how to handle that, and they fumble, and Kansas gets the ball, and boom, off to the races you go. But the offense definitely struggled. BYU played well, but Kansas, you're looking at them, and the only thing interrupting a 4-game win streak was the fumble Jalen Daniels had against K-State. Otherwise, they win that game. That'd be 4 in a row.
Or had a chance to, absolutely.
I think they do if he hangs on to that football, because they would have run the clock down pretty good, or if not scored. But and then prior to that, the Arizona State game, Sun Devils scored in the final minute of the game. That's like the games they're losing. So they're not but a couple plays or what have you away from like a 5-game winning streak. Instead, it's a 2, it's a 3 out of the last 4, but you'll take it, and you'll take how it feels now compared to how it felt early on in the season.
I'm telling you, it's fun to look at the scenarios and all the 4 and 3 teams in the conference and more. And Baylor's won 4 in a row. We'll have a little note on them. I hear a nugget from Dave Aranda at 4:00 today, and a couple of notes about what's happened that has turned them around. The AP Top 25 poll. Here it is. Right there in your glory, Oregon with a 3-point win in their weekend game. Ohio State, Texas at 3. Their defense flexed the muscles. They continue to play better despite having so many guys enter the NFL. Penn State, Indiana, which gets a lot of credit for their offense, but their defense, you'll see that in a moment, how highly ranked their defense is. So the teams that moved up the most, really nobody. South Carolina moved up 4. Tulane moved up 5. BYU dropped 7. Washington State dropped quite a bit with their loss. They dropped 6 after New Mexico got them. And there was one other team that fell. Tennessee dropped 4 after their loss to Georgia.
Yeah, there's about to be some chaos tomorrow night when it comes to these rankings, because how do the computers and the committee separate out the logjam, and we'll talk about it in a second, in the SEC, and it's going to go to show you that, once again, Greg Sankey's going to get his way, but I can't wait to see which SEC fan base is mad at Boise State. There's going to be an SEC fan base out there that their social media presence is going to be like, well, Boise State, and they're going to be mad because they're the team
that's why they're going to go to 16.
Is ranked 12th, and not – which they probably should be even ranked higher than 12th, but I don't think the committee would be.
12th in the college football playoff standings is like those 2 or 3 G5 teams that are ranked at 23, 24, and 25.
Well, I just can't wait to hear how Boise State's 9-1 really isn't all that impressive, and especially not as impressive as South Carolina's 7-3, and the Gamecocks deserve to be, the 8th SEC team in the field. I mean, I'm sure we'll hear that argument from some corner of the Southeast, but I think Boise State's kept their head above water and just kept churning. We know the story with Ashton Genty being the headliner there, and I can understand poking holes at the opponents or the competition level, whatever you want to do there, but there's no denying that they keep winning, and they've had some impressive performances and have one of the better players in the country. So, I'm sure there will be some picking that apart, but you need the Boise States in this field. You need those teams to make this a true college football playoff. And you can't just wash away the group of 5, even though I know there are attempts to do so, and there will be more attempts in the future, especially from the parties who don't like seeing Boise State in this field because they'd rather see a 3-loss South Carolina team for some reason. But
if that's how if they end up with 3.
We'll see how that all goes. Lenore Sellers is playing really well, and they've actually, they're a good team to spotlight that's playing good football. But, yeah, I think Boise State's got the ability to still sit there and play spoiler. Yeah, there's a lot of different scenarios here that are still in play with a couple weeks to go.
Here are some bangers. What are bangers? 2 teams in the top 25 playing each other this weekend, including that Indiana game in Ohio State at 11 o'clock Saturday morning. BYU at 21st ranked Arizona State. We got a couple of nuggets about the Sun Devils in a minute. And Army at Notre Dame. 18th ranked Army, the Cadets against the Fighting Irish at Yankee Stadium late, or not late, but that's an evening game on Saturday.
So did you want to talk about the postseason at a different point, or should I do it in this lump of rankings right here when it comes to the fact that BYU is now the highest-ranked Big 12 team at 14?
No, yeah, we're going to get to that. We'll get to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
All right, so here is Dave Bartu, which would be a good time. We put him up. Here's Dave Bartu, who we had on last week to kind of explain how all this is going to work out. Barring crazy stuff, the playoffs are set. 1 ACC, 1 Big 12. That is in question. 1 Notre Dame, 1 G5, Boise State, it appears. 4 SEC and 4 Big Tens. With Tennessee out at 12, right behind Indiana, in his opinion, will be out at 11 unless Indiana doesn't get smoked by Ohio State this weekend.
Yeah, well, yeah, time's going to tell on that this week. But, yeah, there's going to be 4 and 4, even though you can make an argument that, some of the Big Ten teams' schedules don't match up with some of the ones that are
I said this last week, man. I said this last week. All the talk early on in the season about these big matchups that we were getting, and we were getting some of them, like now Texas and A&M's a conference game again. But look at some of these schedules, dude. These Big Ten and they're not playing anybody. Like they're playing a couple of good teams.
Georgia sure has.
Well, Georgia, there's an example to use, but look at Texas' schedule. And it's not their fault. I'm not blaming the schools, but one thing that these bigger conferences have done is you go, oh, it's the SEC. You look at the schedule and you go like, well, damn, they played like 3 teams that are actually pretty good, and everybody else is just kind of, I don't know, average across the country. And I think that's the case in the Big Ten as well. Like, yeah, you're getting Oregon, Ohio State, and you're going to get Indiana, Ohio State, but you're also getting a lot of just filler. You're getting the Purdue game.
Some of what's happened as well are teams that traditionally have been at least pretty good, even if it's been like not the last 10 years, but some teams like where Florida is, although how about Florida in what they did over the weekend? Oklahoma's down, Michigan is down, LSU is down. So there's some teams that aren't living up to their end of the bargain that are on some of these schedules, but and then it's the algorithm. And you could either get a break or you could also just get hammered because there are teams that are better than we thought as we entered the season. So there we are with Dave Bartu. But here's another thing, and this is true, man. I'm laughing my off because this is going to be fun. How do you rank 2-loss Georgia, 2-loss Ole Miss, 2-loss Alabama, and 2-loss Tennessee? Alabama beat Georgia, Tennessee beat Alabama, Georgia beat Tennessee, Ole Miss beat Georgia.
Yeah, you can't. I mean, like they're experiencing a larger version of that, and you're not even getting into
of what? A larger version
of what the Big 12 went through
in 14,
or even in what 10? When was the Crabtree year?
That was 8.
That
was
in
2008. Yeah.
This is a larger scale of that. They beat them. They beat this. Okay, what happens? What happens if A&M beats Texas and they're both 10-2? Okay, so then you throw that little wrinkle in there. Provided Tennessee beats Vanderbilt at the end of the year, and other crazy things don't happen, like Alabama loses in the Iron Bowl or Ole Miss loses in the Egg Bowl.
But those are possibilities.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I mean,
so let's let it go week to week. But you're right. Yeah, Paul, you're right, because that would be pure chaos. If Texas runs it but loses to A&M and doesn't play in the SEC championship game, they don't have to answer for it, but there will be questions about that because of the fact that what they did win against, Oklahoma down, Florida's down, didn't have Lagway, Michigan's down. It's not their fault, but it's a part of the conversation.
Hey, Siri, what's another problem like the one I just mentioned with these bigger conferences? This right here.
There you go. There you go.
So, like, the 2 things that we've just pointed out are the problems with the bigger 16-team conferences is you get these log jams where some combinations of teams have played each other, but a bunch of combinations have not, and it creates this tiebreaker, which is fun for the chaos lovers. And I have Like, that's one thing with the Big 12, which I know we're going to talk about the Big 12 and BYU, but there's so much, like, if there's another problem with the playoff, and I like the playoff, I'm much for the playoff than for any other format that we've had over the years. But if there's another byproduct of that, it's the log jams like this, and it's the having to cheerlead your conference almost, I feel like, sometimes. I'm sitting there watching this week, and I'm like, rooting for BYU, and I go, why am I rooting for BYU? Because, like, the Big 12 has to have a representative in the – you know what I'm saying? It's just kind of a weird deal where now everybody's, like, rooting for –
That's a great point.
It's like everybody's rooting for their conference to get a team in rather than, like, just enjoying the games or, like, wanting to see the upset. You're like, no, BYU needs to beat Kansas so that the Big 12 gets – and I'm just sitting there going, like, why would I worry about that unless I'm a BYU fan or Brett Yormark? But I see that – you know, with the jostling, well, we need 5 teams in the deal for the SEC or for the Big Ten. Or
when A&M and Missouri left for the SEC and it started that chant, SEC, SEC, that's kind of really when it really did pick up. And, of course, then since that time they've won numerous national titles. It is crazy.
But it is a total mess in the SEC, and you know, they're going to get their fair share along with the Big Ten, but it's going to make for a fascinating last 2 or 3 weeks of the season, that's for sure.
And you can't go to divisions. There's too many teams because then you would have hardly any crossover games. Then you have the rivalry games that may be a crossover game. Here's Stuart Mandel. The main impetus for the 12-team playoff is it was the same brands every year. Coming up, you're going to have Indiana, Army, BYU, and Arizona State with big games.
Yeah.
I love it.
And that's
and they all might get wiped off the map. I don't know while BYU is playing Arizona State. You don't know what's going to happen. Indiana might get pummeled. Yet again, maybe they don't. Army's got Notre Dame. That won't be easy. Maybe they win the game. And then, of course, someone's got to win between BYU and Arizona State.
Yeah, look, it's made it better. I mean, has it taken out the inherent advantages of being an SEC or Big Ten team? No, but I do think that year one, if you're in the camp of, hey, maybe everybody's a little bit more the same than we realize, the proof is in the pudding on that side than it is on the Big Ten and SEC are head and shoulders above everybody else. Like,
well, they have some really, really, really good teams.
No, but like also, again, you want to break down. You'll run into walls because there's no real ground to stand on of this team's schedule is definitely better than this team's when you take all the teams that are playoff worthy in. Like, you might have a couple that stand out because of the luck of the draw, but for the most part, you know, what's the difference between Penn State and Indiana in their own conference will have the same, if Indiana loses this week, will have the same exact resume. Okay, so they're both going to go in.
And both lost to Ohio State.
But if you took Penn State and Indiana's schedule and put them up against Arizona State and BYU's schedule, I promise you, strength of schedule-wise, numbers-wise, offense-wise, all of those things would pretty much the same.
Here's a note from Wet Blanket, then Craig, follow up if you don't mind. Oklahoma State is 0-7 in the Big 12, but they beat Arkansas. This was from Wet Blanket. USC is 3-5 in the Big 10. They beat LSU. Cal is 1-5 in the ACC. They beat Auburn. Georgia State is 0-6 in the Sun Belt. They beat Vanderbilt. I mean, you could dig into this, and you would think all that information is in front of everybody, of course, a part of the College Football Playoff Committee.
Yeah, I mean, it is, and that's a valid point. I think you could also say, well, hey, Oklahoma beat Houston, and go on and do that as well if you want to. But, yeah, I mean, there's definitely some arguments to be made about perceived strengths and things of that nature. I do think for all of the probably overblown, like, rooting for your conference to have playoff spots that I sort of just found that strange over the weekend. And then some of the other things that I mentioned that have been problematic, like the log jam of tiebreakers with a couple weeks to play. Going back to what you just kind of blew through a second ago is one of the benefits of the playoff, which is the fact that there's all of these games that seemingly wouldn't mean much to most people, but now you're suddenly like, damn, I need to watch Arizona State BYU for at least a second.
Unlike Desmond Howard.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on a rant there. I don't care. I mean, that was not shocking to me. I mean, walk like a duck, talk like a duck, you know, all that whole thing. But, yeah, I think that it has provided another layer of intrigue and a lot of extra spice on some matchups that otherwise would be on the periphery and not of much interest to people. But now because you're trying to get that fifth league team in or because you're a fan of, you know, whoever it may be, you are slightly more inclined to pop on a game and go, oh, shoot, that's interesting because that might mean this team has a chance here. And that's not the case in years past.
You mean like before the BCS, how it was in college football? When I know the polls decided it, which may not have been the best way to do it, but that's what college football was like. Are you want to watch USC and UCLA? Hey, man, one of those two teams is going to go play in the Rose Bowl. By the way, South Carolina, we talk about Georgia's schedule. One of their losses was then LSU at 16. Ole Miss is 12th, lost by 24. That's a dominant loss. And then they took Alabama to the buzzer, losing by 2. When Alabama was ranked 7th at the time in the country. They'd beaten A&M, top 10, Missouri in the top 25 at the time. Now, let's skip Ralph Russo. We'll skip that one. We will skip that one. This from RG3 on Baylor's win on the road against West Virginia. I did not predict him to do that. They just are in such a rhythm right now.
I did.
I know you and Craig did. Yeah. I'm still 8-2 overall, but I damn sure missed that one. The players at Baylor want Dave Aranda to be their coach, playing like it with 4 straight wins. Bowl eligible, averaging 45.7 points per game over the last 4. Jake Spavital, the offensive coordinator, has Sawyer Robertson playing the best ball of his career. Bryson Washington is a walking touchdown. 8 touchdowns now, in the last couple of games. I'll have a note about the offense and what has changed and why did it change. We'll have that today at about 4 o'clock. But, yeah, RG3, they're noticing what Baylor's done with their 4 consecutive wins.
Yeah, they're playing tough right now. They've got confidence. Things are working out. And, yeah, the one thing, and I think this is such a testament to Dave Aranda, is most of the time teams at 2-4, no matter how much they love the coach, he's lost the locker room. Not so much in that the players don't want to play for him, but they're just emotionally worn out and they can't give all they have to give anymore. It's just here we go. They know what's coming. They hear the chatter. They hear the rumors, and unbeknownst to themselves, they've kind of given up on a coach that they like. But they didn't do that here. They bought in, and he and the staff kept them bought in, which I think more than anything else is the true miracle here, is that at 2-4 and losing some games and some pretty, letting them get away, and you could have lost your confidence, they somehow built it up and didn't let it get out the window.
Craig, when a team stops listening to the coach and the message gets stale, that's when you're in trouble. But they apparently they did. They kept listening. They kept kind of trying to beat that door down, and finally all of a sudden they were able to do so.
Well, and respectfully, you kind of blew through the lead here, which is the announcement that Dave Aranda's coming back officially. And so, yeah, that's a nice streak that they've been on. And the 4 wins in a row is not something that you could have foreseen or anybody would have predicted at the time, especially the combination of the wins that they've had in Lubbock, just decimating Texas Tech the way that they did in blowout fashion, winning at the last minute against TCU when typically that shoe's on the other foot, doing so when you're honoring, these special teams in program history and getting to do that in front of them made that extra special. Going to Morgantown, winning for the first time ever there, just beating Oklahoma State, which you haven't done in the regular season for a couple of years. Do all 4 of those things in the last 5 weeks and put yourself in a position where you're now not in that top part of the race, but you're right in that second tier. It's been a really fun ride. It's been overdue, quite frankly, because I think if you'd held on and not gotten to the winning, then we'd be talking about a different scenario potentially for some of Dave Aranda's staff. Maybe not him, but certainly they would have to have made more changes. And instead, they've got a nice groove with a nice group, and the sky's the limit as far as what's ahead of them. Not only these last couple of games, but now it's going to be 3 games because they're bowl eligible. They've checked a big accomplishment off the to-do list as far as getting back into the postseason. And, they've got 8-9 wins that they're capable of going and grabbing now, which is just a massive turnaround from where they were, post-Colorado in particular.
Yeah, they've had the frustrating loss at Ames. That was the one that really had that question their whatever. And after, of course, what happened against Colorado. Arizona State, BYU, and Colorado are all trying to get to the championship game, and I am the one that had them 12 through 16 somewhere. I admit that. It's been fun to watch. I'm happy for every single one of their programs. This was a tweet from, is it Mike Golick Jr.?
Yes.
When he has a picture of, there's the formation with Scadaboo, who was marvelous in that game, but so were others. Just a massive amount. Look who the numbers are in the 70s in front of him. 3,000 pounds worth. Mike Golick said, "Good morning, Arizona State, Kenny Dillingham." Then there was a note from Ben Coleman. That's 3,000 pounds of beef, along with Scatterboo being a fire hydrant. And then Kenny Dillingham put out this note. Fun fact, we need a steakhouse to NIL the players in this formation to make sure the formation stays 3,000 pounds, eat good, play good. They are playing so well. God, It's fun to watch them.
They are. Jordan, their offensive line's really good. Scatterboo's great. Sam Levitt's better every week. Jordan Tyson had a heck of a game this week. He's fun to watch. And Ken Dillingham, look, he's an offensive magician for sure, and he's a very young coach, so he's not even scratched the surface of what he can do. But the bottom line is he got Jordan Travis on the right track. He got Bo Nix on the right track, and now Sam Levitt's looking good. If you're a quarterback looking to go play for a guy who can get you to the league, look, Bo Nix is about to be he's a Rookie of the Year candidate right now for the Broncos. So if you want to get to the league, I don't think playing for Dillingham's a bad thing.
No, they're playing really well right now. Sam Levitt's gotten exponentially better from the start of the season, and obviously Dillingham knows what he's doing with quarterbacks. I didn't know what to expect from Sam Levitt. Couldn't really put a grade next to him, so that's part of the reason why Arizona State was, I think, so low in mind for a lot of people. It's not like Levitt was some sure thing. He's a young, talented quarterback, but you didn't really know what to expect, especially not knowing much about what would be around him as well, and a young coach and a change in conference and all of these different wild cards, and they've navigated them all well. And even this past weekend, I mean, the thoughts about Arizona State, if you were trying to pick them apart, would be that they hadn't necessarily played the toughest schedule, but they walked into Manhattan and put it on K-State early on, built up a lead, and then just kind of sat on it and successfully did that. But that was a huge win for a variety of reasons, including staying in Big 12 contention, especially if they win this weekend. So they've given themselves a golden opportunity to have a massive home game that has a lot of importance behind it coming up on Saturday. And, BYU's, I'm sure, going to be looking to bounce back. So that's a very intriguing game with some big-time implications. But, yeah, Levitt's been great. Scatterboo is probably the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year, or he at least is one of the finalists for that. And he didn't even have that big of a game on Saturday. He wasn't even the main threat. It was Jordan Tyson, who's not just some fly-by-night. Jordan Tyson's been really good all year, has been especially good of late. Young man's from Texas, so I've been following him pretty closely, and curious to see where he ends up in the all Big 12 conversation when it's all said and done as well. But, yeah, they are a team that believes they've got an identity, and they've got a charismatic young head coach who knows how to spot talent and coach them up, and they're playing really well, and that was mightily impressive. It looked like they were just going to beat down Kansas State, but I think they just kind of got their lead and were happy with it, and didn't feel the need to go and make it more than it was. And K-State made a little run there at the end, but it never got super threatening. And we got to talk about Chris Kleiman at some point because of one of the things I heard in his post-game press conference.
No, I heard it too. Yeah. I actually reached out to him.
But Kenny Dillingham is a great young coach, and he's a good thing for the league.
There's a lot to get to on a Monday. We try to get to as much as we possibly can. Let's skip the CJ fight play. We can bring that up at some particular point. We'll get to the total defense, too, all right, Garrett, at some particular point. Let's talk about a couple. Well, first of all, we don't need to put the graphic up. A&M in Texas, that game on Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend is going to be 6:30. And today was the anniversary of the bonfire that fell and killed 12. They had that memorial earlier today. So that is the same day they announced the kickoff, which will be at 6:30.
I was at the bonfire game. It was one of my favorite experiences of my life, being at that game. It was very emotional. A&M won right at the end. Bumgarner caught a pass, and A&M was not they were okay that year, but beating Texas was a huge upset. Texas came in pretty good. Drew Brees was sitting 3 rows behind me there, and I was with my mom, my dad, my sister. I'd never seen my dad just like as emotional at a game as there, because it was in the whole stands. Like, it was just this outpouring of relief and joy after a really tragic week.
Yeah, it was. I remember the game itself, which was, you're right, it was almost like releasing so much just devastation and winning that game. We're going to bounce around a little bit. We have Ari Temkin coming up at 3:40 today. We have a lot to get to, including Phil Bennett, J.J. Joe, and Mark Schipper from Fifth Down College Football. Tom Herman, this is what we had earlier. He is now officially out. He is now out. But here's the kicker on this from Matt Zenitz. Florida Atlantic is rehiring Rock Bellatoni, who was fired last week by Tom Herman as defensive coordinator. They bring him back to be the interim on the day that they fire Tom Herman. That is that's a cold-blooded move. That's a mafia move right there.
Well, I mean, if there's a person that you want to fire spitefully, I mean, Tom Herman can rub you that way. And when they're 6-16 over his tenure and he fires a guy who they like and then they lose, yeah. I mean, I'm surprised to see that happen because it usually doesn't. But if there's a coach who could grate on your nerves with his kind of he likes to talk down to people. He really does. If there's a move you make for spite, it probably has to do with Tom Herman.
Yeah, I mean, he was a great guest on this show earlier this year, and we appreciated his time when he joined us, and you hoped for his sake that he would have grown up a little bit and learned lessons from his past and his time at Texas in particular when he was handed the golden goose and the golden opportunity and really just pissed it away, to be as blunt as possible, I guess. And, finally found his way back into college. Finally, it was a short little break, little dabble in the NFL and whatnot, but he finally found himself back in a head coaching chair after a couple years. And obviously it's not worked out well, and they've made the move they've made, and kind of seemed like the writing was on the wall that really maybe not too much has changed when you saw that interaction a few weeks back with Alex Golish in the post game, and the fact that Herman's wife, who we got to see probably far too much of during his time at Texas, she makes an appearance to pull him away from Golish and end it, and it's just like, damn, man, that's such a bad look. That's such an immature look, and I don't know what in the world is going on between the two of you and what beef you have, but it just wasn't a good look, and you could just tell things were sort of a little bit shaky, right? And here we are a couple weeks later, whatever it's been, a month, and he's being fired. So I hate that for anybody. I don't root for firings. I had hoped that maybe things had turned around for him personally. Maybe they have still, and it's just not translating on the field. But, yeah, regardless, it's been a rough go of things. Tom Herman, the head coach these last few years.
Yeah, it has been. Wisconsin has fired their offensive coordinator, Phil Longo. He had been at North Carolina, Luke Fickell and company. They are on a 3-game losing streak, which sets up a terrible game with two bad teams in Wisconsin and also Nebraska. Wisconsin was 91st total offense. Although they run the ball well, nothing like they used to at 57th in the country. They are now moving on from Phil Longo. How about this deal with did you guys hear how Stanford and Louisville in that game ended?
I watched the end of it.
You hear how it ended?
He watched the end
I watched the end of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What was so weird and quirky about the game, other than the field goal for Stanford to win the game?
Well, I mean, it was Cardinals and Cardinal. That was one that was weird. One was a bird, one was a tree. But yeah, I saw the field goal there. You said watch it weird and quirky. It was in my quad box, so it was up there, and I watched them kick the field goal to win it.
Yeah, it was a penalty on Louisville that allowed Stanford to get the ball back. And then there was like an unsportsmanlike penalty that set up what was a much more manageable field goal. And it was weird the way Louisville just imploded at the end of that game, Stanford winning that game 38-35.
Well, Louisville was in the top 25 with 3 losses last week. By the virtue of their 3 losses were all teams that were ranked and ranked high. Miami, they lost to Miami. They lost to Notre Dame. I can't remember who the other one was, but they had 3, maybe SMU, but they lost to 3 high-ranked teams. Well, you don't get to stay in with 4 losses no matter what, especially if that 4th one is to Stanford, who just picked up, I guess, with their 3rd win of the year.
Yep, they had multiple penalties against Louisville that allowed Stanford to get closer and closer to getting a chance to kick the game-winning field goal, and they did. So just wanted to bring that up. Craig, you look like completely disinterested in that story.
I just don't have anything to add to that.
Yeah,
I'm
no.
sorry. I don't have anything to say.
Stanford capitalizes off multiple Louisville penalties to win its first game against a Power 5 team at home in 2 years with the field goal at the buzzer to win the game. Now, Colorado's defense. The difference in Colorado now is the defense is making plays. They had 9 TFLs in their win. 9 in their win. 4 sacks, 3 interceptions, and a fumble recovery in their win. We knew they had all the glitz and glamour, the weapons and whatever, but how about that against Utah? 13 plays behind the line of scrimmage and forced 4 turnovers in the win.
Yeah, I mean, that's last year they were a turnstile defense. You couldn't stop them for anything, or they couldn't stop you for anything. Now they're making plays. They're not, again, I don't think they're a scary defense, but they're an efficient defense. They get it done. They make stops when they have to, and they have a passing offense that's just crazy good.
Yeah, it was a really nice win for them. They're in control of their own destiny, and the defense, I mean, at this point, we're like 11 weeks in, guys. It's not a surprise anymore that the defense is pretty good and that it's the real deal. So that was a surprise early on. It shouldn't be a surprise at this point. They've played well throughout the entire course of nearly an entire season. So with 2 games to go, they just need to win and handle their business, and they'll be in Arlington and maybe even an outside shot at the playoff. We haven't talked about the Big 12 in the playoff, but Colorado is a team that technically has a chance, although all of the discussion is about them being left out entirely and what all may happen, you know, as negative as possible, and I understand why with BYU losing, but Colorado's got a chance to continue making some noise. They've made a lot of people eat crow from the beginning of the year, a lot of the postseason prognostications of Prime and company, and they're loving life. I do think that the Travis Hunter Heisman campaign, they've really PR'd that thing up and made it seem like he's having just like the most insane year possible, and there are no negatives. I think that they've kind of smoke and mirrored that thing a little bit. Not that he's not deserving in any way. If he's named the Heisman Trophy winner, I won't, have a problem with that. But I do think like some of his stuff is sort of smoke and mirrored, how it's sort of portrayed, because we don't look at every defensive snap and grade that like we do a guy just purely on offense, right? It's like, oh, he got an interception. Well, what about all the other plays where the dude caught a touchdown, or whatever?
If he did, yeah.
But I don't know. I think they've done a really good job of kind of pumping Hunter up to the point where it feels like there's just not really much of a doubt that he's going to be the guy when the time comes.
Yeah, the odds flipped dramatically over the weekend. He did have 2 plays that were spectacular. Like they call them Heisman moments. One of them, he was going to throw a pass on a flea flicker, stopped, cut back, went through the middle, scored. And then there was also an unbelievable catch that he made in that game. But, hey, Ashton Genty's pretty good too. And he had another big weekend in their win over the weekend for Boise State and the Broncos.
Yeah, I just feel like his plays that he makes on both sides of the ball, you see the highlights and things of that, and it's the way that Colorado has been pushing him. I think it's got a lot of people that are going to be giving their vote to Travis Hunter, and deservedly so. I think Genty's still got a chance. I don't know about anybody else really other than that, but Colorado's beating their chest, and they've got every right to. They've talked the talk and they've walked the walk, and they could be walking into the Big 12 championship game and walking into the Heisman ceremony and walking away with a lot of hardware. So kudos to them, and I know it's probably tough for a lot of people who were thinking that none of this was realistically in the cards for them, and that if anything, we'd be talking about Dion getting ready to leave and players jumping off ship and all that to go to the draft. But instead, we're talking about them and this current season and the things that are still out there. So it's been one of the better stories, even though they're one of the more divisive teams out there.
After the weekend, is the Big 12 in a position to be shut out of the college football playoff? Ari Temkin will join us about that. What do you guys think? What's going to happen? Are they now in a spot where they may not have anybody in the playoff?
No, I don't think so. I think that they just won't have a bye. I don't know where everybody's panicking and saying they won't have a team at all. I mean, I can kind of understand the rationale. I can understand the angle there, but when BYU lost this weekend, which I know we'll dive further into that, again, a great win by Kansas and a really tough loss for BYU, although you could kind of see this sort of percolating a little bit with the way that they had played recently. But I think that the Big 12 champ will get in. I think the Big 12 champ will be playing a first-round playoff game, whoever that may be, whether it's BYU, Colorado, Arizona State, even Iowa State still has a shot. It's those four, really. But, yeah, I can understand where there's a little bit of panic, but my mind's not on not making it whatsoever. I still feel like there's a spot for the Big 12.
Well, they got work to do. They have work to do, but Paul?
They'll be fine. I mean, the Big 12 will get a team in. They're not going to get a bye, more than likely, unless crazy things happen.
If they don't get a bye, and it's BYU, Arizona State, Colorado, what if, and again, we do a lot of this what if the SEC and the Big Ten are going to have 4 in?
Well, they're probably going to play one of those teams. I mean,
Notre Dame's 11.
Yeah.
Boise State's 12. The ACC is 13, and maybe so. You hear the numbers I'm popping up here?
Yeah.
Yeah. There is a chance. It's not unthinkable, but they just need to take care of business. Colorado just needs to keep.
They're not gonna,
whoever it is
look,
needs to run the table.
The only way that they're out of it is if a second G5 conference jumps them like Army. So
or ACC with Miami, SMU, or Clemson.
Yeah, it's the 5 highest-ranked conference champions. So you're in the 5.
You're in the 5. It's 5 highest-ranked conference champs. So their conference champ, as long as they're right ahead of the AAC champ, then they'll be fine.
Yep. Notre Dame obviously could knock Army out of that possibility if they beat the Cadets coming up this weekend.
I've seen, though, a lot of they're not going to have a team at all, and I don't think that's in the cards whatsoever right now. I think the Big 12 champ is getting in. I think the odds of having 2 are they're 0 at this point. But, yeah, other than that, I think they're going to have a champion in.